Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Our first month of the year is complete, so naturally it's time to talk about the books that we read. I've heard so many people joke about how January was like 100 days long, but I actually loved how slowly January went by because I was not in a rush to be reading. This month was definitely about finding my inner peace with reading, and that meant reading a little bit slower. I did finally continue a series that has been haunting me and a couple 5-star reads, so it was actually the perfect start to the month. I'm very happy with how January went. As I've included in my last few monthly wrap-ups, Fable gave me a cute little graphic for the books that I did read, so there's a little sneak peek for you about what we're going to be discussing today. And let's quickly review the reading stats before we hop on in. Since I did take it a little bit slower this month, I read 8 books in total, 4 of those being fantasy, the other 4 being romance. I didn't set a January TBR, which honestly my mental sanity really thanked me for, so I don't have a TBR counter to show you guys, but I can say that I think I read 3 books for my 2025 TBR, so I will definitely be counting that as a win. For my average rating, I read a lot of good books. So my average rating for January was a 3.8, which is much higher than my usual average rating, and my total pages read was 3,131 pages. So with those stats out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about some books. The first 5 books I read were all within my 24-hour reading video. I will make sure to link that above and in the description box if you want to check it out. But the book that I started with, which had taken me like 3 weeks to finish, was An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This is the start of a series, and I believe it's called the Ember Quartet, where we have a dual POV following our FMC Laya and our MMC Elias. This series, this world is very dark, it's very brutal, extremely cruel to just about anyone, but especially women. So if you are interested in checking out the series overall, I would recommend that you check trigger warnings first. But we first get introduced to Laya, and her family is from a family of scholars, and the scholars have been overtaken and are now ruled by the Martial Empire. A lot of scholars have been killed, a lot of them have been enslaved, and unfortunately we get introduced to Laya and her story at a very difficult point in time. She loses some people close to her, and her brother is taken as prisoner because he is suspected of helping this rebellion resistance. Laya has to escape and ends up finding these rebels. She makes some sort of a deal with them where if she helps them, they will help her, and she is sent to Blackcliff Academy, which is the training academy for those in the Martial Empire. And at Blackcliff is where we meet our MMC Elias. He is a trainee about to graduate from the academy, and his profession is going to be a mask. And they are just kind of like the biggest, the baddest, the scariest of their police force. You would think his position in society is better than Laya's, but he absolutely hates his life. He hates what he's being forced to do every day, and he has dreams of running away and deserting. However, of course, things are never that simple. He gets brought into this prophecy, this series of trials, and it's fight to the death if he hopes to get out of it. While these two are seemingly unlikely allies, while they are at Blackcliff, their stories become intertwined, and they end up helping each other in different ways. I did thoroughly enjoy the story. I gave it a 4 stars. I feel like the scope of this story and this world is going to be amazing. It was extremely well written, and our characters had very complex personalities and conflicts within their own personalities that felt very realistic. What was hard for me is definitely some of the content that takes place was personally triggering for me, so I had to take a lot of breaks. And also, especially in the first half of the story, I felt like it moved very slowly. We had to do a lot of world building, which I appreciate. It was well done, but it meant that the story progressed very slowly, and I really didn't feel like the story took off until well into the second half of the book. I am very intrigued for how book 2 is going to go. I think we're going to get a lot more world building. I think the relationship dynamics are really going to progress. I am extremely excited for it. I already have book 2 on my shelves, but because of another fantasy series that I'm in, I fear I'm going to have to wait quite a while before I pick up book 2 and continue on with this, which was probably my own mistake for starting this so early. I could have planned this out better. I hope that I don't forget everything that happens in here because rereading this would be somewhat painful to do. But if you have the mental headspace for an epic scope fantasy world and you don't mind the darker topics, I would 100% recommend checking out the series because I think this is only going to get better from here. So within that readathon, after finishing that epic scope fantasy, I definitely was in the mood for something lighter, something not as mentally taxing, and I picked up Not Another Love Song by Julie Soto. Oh my god, did this book take me by surprise. This story follows 2 rivaling musicians in New York City, where we follow a professional violinist, Gwen, and she is within the same orchestra as our MMC, Xander, who is a prolific cellist player. He is already extremely famous, very successful, and has quite the arrogant personality to go along with it. Once he takes the time to notice that Gwen is in the same orchestra as him, their relationship starts to grow, and he is very intrigued with Gwen as she has a lot of raw talent but is self-taught, which drastically is different from his experience growing up as a child. Both of his parents were in the music industry, and he had a lot of availability and resources that Gwen didn't have access to. The angst and the tension that we follow with these two, especially once they start making music together, I can't even describe how good it is. The tension is palpable on the page. I fell in love with these characters together. I wasn't expecting for these two musicians to make such an impact on me. I literally haven't played any music or been within the music scene since I was like in 6th grade, but oh my gosh, I felt like I could just fall into these scenes with them whenever they were creating music and just sharing such a deep bond. If you don't have experience playing music and that's not something that's within your background, I would highly encourage the audiobook. The narrator within that does such a good job of placing you in the scene with these two characters. If you do have music history and you are able to follow a lot of the music jargon, I don't think the audiobook is necessary, but please pick this book up. It was such an easy 5 stars. I knew it halfway through the book that I was going to rate this 5 stars. It took me so much by surprise. I felt like the writing and the relationship dynamic was just so well done, and these were characters where you could truly believe their connection and you rooted for them so hard. I felt very differently between our next book and that last one, so I'm not going to stay on this one too long. I read No More Secrets by Lucy Score, which is the start of the Blue Moon series. This is like an 8-book romance series, which is nuts, where we follow different residents within the small town of Blue Moon. And book 1 starts with our FMC Summer, who is a magazine editor from New York who comes to this small town to interview our MMC Carter. Carter runs an organic farm, I think in upstate New York, and she is interested in writing an article about him, the town, and the farm. Whenever she goes to Blue Moon to do this interview, she does stay with him on the farm, so there is forced proximity and a lot of tension that is created right away. And I'm sure you can see on the screen that I did give this book a 2 stars. My biggest problem within this book is that it was very well known and discussed often that she was only visiting this farm for a week. The insta-love was insane that by day 4, I'm pretty sure they were already saying I love you. The relationship and their connection felt so unjustified. It felt like the author did no work to get them to where they were after 3 or 4 days together. The book was just wholeheartedly unbelievable. If I could root for and embrace our last couple, I could do the absolute opposite with the couple in No More Secrets. I think this book solely was written so that our author could write some spice scenes between them, and there were so many spice scenes in this book that it honestly just like felt so unjustified and awkward at points of like, why are they having sex right now? So overall, this book really didn't hit for me. I mistakenly bought book 2 in the series, so I will be continuing on until at least book 2. If that one doesn't work out, I'm just gonna scrap the series as a whole. It's just clearly not something for me. I've heard a lot of good things about Lucy Score, so I think she does have the ability to write believable characters and relationships. I just really don't think that this is going to turn out to be her best work. So after those 2 romances, I wanted a little bit of a change of pace. So I picked up Starling House by Alix Harrow. I knew that this was going to be a bit of a darker fantasy. Goodreads does also tag this as horror. I think this is very much an introduction to horror. It's nothing absurd. It's more of that supernatural kind. So even though I'm a scaredy cat, this isn't something that I was too scared of while reading. But this is a lovely standalone short fantasy book. It's just over 300 pages. Within this book, we mainly stay within our FMC's point of view, whose name is Opal. And Opal has had a very tough life. At the age of 15, her and her brother were orphaned, and she had to take on being the guardian of her brother. That involved her working 2 jobs, dropping out of high school, and they currently live in a motel. Just about everything in Opal's life has not gone to plan, and she's fully accepted that her dreams are to be pushed aside so that she can do everything in her power to place her younger brother in a better position that she's been in. And she's currently saving up and working towards putting him in a private boarding school in hopes of him getting a better education. One thing about Opal is that she's always had these dreams and this calling to this house within their town called Starling House. And no one really knows anything about Starling House. There's a lot of stories, there's a lot of theories, but just about no one in the town has ever been within the home. And the owners of the home are also very mysterious. One day, Opal basically gets summoned and finds a way and an opportunity to spend some more time within the home, where she learns that the house very much has a personality of its own. Not only that, but the owner of this home has quite the interesting personality as well, and him and his family have a lot of secrets that they've been trying to remain hidden for quite a long time. So as I'm providing this description, I feel like you would think that this rating is very high because this is very much a unique and interesting premise. This is not something like I've ever read before. I ended up giving it a 3.5 stars because I felt like the ending lacked something for me. I don't know if this was just the 24-hour readathon or if this book truly was a fever dream, but once we got to the final reveal of what was going on and what was causing the home and the things around it to act a certain way, I don't know. Something about the reasoning just lacked for me. After looking on Goodreads, I don't think I'm the only one that felt that way. I feel like this is a very interesting book to pick up. And like mentioned, it's only a standalone, so you're not having to commit to too much. But I wish that the point of the story was stronger, because if it was, I definitely would have rated this higher. I want to find more books like this. I really did kind of like the sentient nature of this house and how it had its own personality, but there was ultimately something missing from this one for me. Trust me when I tell you that it is absolutely crazy that within the first 5 books of January, I found a second 5-star read. Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonam-Young. I feel like my Goodreads review of this sums it up perfectly. I said, well, if this isn't the sweetest, warm hug, sunshine on a cloudy day book I've ever read. Our main characters, Wyn and Beau, have a one-night stand together on Halloween, and a few weeks later, Wyn finds out that she's pregnant. I know, everyone hates the accidental pregnancy trope, but there is something within this story that is so heartwarming and I swear will heal you from the inside out. Both of our main characters, Wyn and Beau, have limb differences and it allows for them to connect on such a deeper level. Again, you could just believe this love story so thoroughly. Our MMC Beau was truly perfection. He is one of the sweetest characters I've ever read about. Even though there is a bit of spice, I would still categorize this book as wholesome because truly you just want the absolute best for these characters and they are so perfect for one another that I promise you will be smiling from ear to ear every single page that you read. The next book was another Julie Soto read. After how much I loved Not Another Love Song, I wanted to give another romance of hers a go. So I read Forget Me Not, which is a very fun forced proximity second chance romance between a wedding planner, Amma, and a wedding florist, Elliot. Now we know that these two have a history, but we don't know exactly why they ended things. But they have stayed away from each other for the past few years and have not worked any events together. However, through an influencer's wedding, they are forced to team up and create one of the most lavish and extravagant weddings that either of them have ever done. Since I'm getting married soon, I feel like I extra loved the wedding element of this story. It was so fun to see them plan a wedding and see Amma's experience dealing with a lot of different brides, which felt so strangely relatable for the season of life that I'm in currently. But similar to Not Another Love Song, our MMCs are just the most angsty, moody, and a little bit arrogant men that you will ever meet. Now, I don't want you to hear that and get worried. You do very much root for them as well, but they are grumps through and through. But I also didn't find that our FMCs were too sunshiny. I feel like they called out and battled our MMCs a good amount to where their relationship dynamics were really fun to watch. I gave this book a 4 stars because I did very much enjoy these two together, but Elliot is even more moody than Xander. So in the present timeline, Elliot really doesn't talk too much. He's a man of very few words. So I felt like I couldn't root for him in our FMC as much, but I loved getting a glimpse of him in the past timeline because he was much more open and less guarded. And that's where I feel like you really fall in love with him and root for them to get back together. Overall, fantastic book. I feel like Julie Soto has placed herself as an auto-buy author for me. She is exploring the fantasy romance genre later this year with a new release, so I will definitely be giving that a go. If you haven't been able to tell so far throughout this wrap up, fantasy and romance definitely are my favorite genres. So with how well she writes her characters thus far, I think she's going to do great exploring another genre, and I'm excited to see what she has in store. Don't have the physical of this next one. I did listen to this as an audiobook. I listened to Caraval by Stephanie Garber. This is on my 2025 TBR, so I'm very happy that I was able to check this one off. I was expecting that this wasn't going to be my new favorite book. I am wanting to get through the Caraval trilogy so that I can get onto Once Upon a Broken Heart. And I will say that Caraval just really didn't blow me away. We follow the tale of two sisters, Scarlett and Donatella, who get invited by this mysterious man, Legend, to his private magical island for the game of Caraval for this year. And whoever wins Caraval gets granted one wish by him. As these two get to the island and get introduced to the game of Caraval, we learn that nothing is as it appears within this game. You can't trust anyone or anything that you see because it is just a game, and people have been known to kind of go crazy within the game because you ultimately lose the sense of what is real and what is fake. And we're mainly following Scarlett as she tries to win this game of Caraval. Why I ended up not really loving this is Scarlett was written very immaturely. She was extremely naive, made so many pointless and dumb decisions, and I feel like got bailed out by so many characters constantly, and ultimately still would do the wrong thing. I have a big problem with main characters who ultimately turn out to be a little bit useless, and I feel like that's definitely the camp that Scarlett placed herself in. I still am very much interested in the next series after this, so I am going to continue on. I do think our next book follows Donatella more, so I am curious to see how she differs. Hopefully I find her to be a little bit less jarring. I do feel like the aesthetic of Caraval is so fun, so if you're able to get past the annoyances of the characters, this is a fun read, but I think definitely is geared towards more of a younger audience. Our last book, which I'm going to keep extremely short and sweet, was Heir by Sarah J. Maas. This is the fourth book that I've read so far in the Throne of Glass series. I'm doing an entire reading vlog on this. I don't know how I would ever give you a synopsis of this book without giving spoilers, so I'm just going to tell you my rating very quickly. That was a 4 stars. It was a bit unexpected from me since I did give Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight 5 stars. There's a couple things within this book that I didn't fully love, but whenever I do finish the series and post that video, probably in a few months from now, you'll be able to find out why I ultimately feel that way. But this marks our last book that I read within January. So that is it, y'all. That is the January wrap up. Definitely took this month a bit more slowly. I will take the next few months a bit more slowly as well, but I'm still excited nonetheless because I feel like we have a lot of good books on our horizon. Before you leave, I would love to know, what was your favorite book that you read in January, or what is something that you're looking forward to read in February? For now, this is where I will love you and leave you, but make sure to like and subscribe before you leave, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye, guys.